I just got this email from Focus on the Family. I don't know if you get some of their updates. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, that's NASA, their James Webb Space Telescope has confirmed evidence of a long-held Christian belief. The universe had an absolute beginning. So NASA's finally up to date with what the Bible said thousands of years ago. I mean, it goes on and talks about it here. According to NASA, the Webb telescope has confirmed the accuracy of the universe's expansion rate. And at the end, it's a quote from the scientific historian, Dr. Frederick Burnham. The idea that God created the universe is a more respectable hypothesis today than any time in the last 100 years. Isn't that something?
When was that put out?
It just came out today.
Wow.
Yeah. If you guys want it, I can send it on to you. At the end it talks about focus on the family and stuff like that, so it's kind of an ad for focus on the family as well. So I didn't want to push it off on anybody, but I think it's a good organization anyway. By the way, remember some of the things Steve talked about last week as far as the parameters of the universe being just right for life? Okay, I've got one here that says part 1, fine-tuning for life in the universe. They have over 100 things that have to be exactly right to have life here. Strong nuclear force has to be a certain whatever. The weak nuclear force, gravitational force, the electromagnetic force, and on ratio of proton to electron mass. I mean, it's stuff that I don't get at all, but the point is they keep adding to it. It's not getting smaller. The list is increasing year after year as they discover what's going on out in the universe, and they go, hey, how about that? It's just right for people. What an amazing coincidence. Right. And then, okay, that's that one. Then fine-tuning for life on Earth. There are over 400 parameters that they've been looking at that, again, it's increasing. Things like, for us to have life here on Earth, we have to be in the right kind of galaxy, and it goes on and on. I mean, just more things than you think of. Everybody thinks, well, the Earth has a nice tilt to it, and we're at the right distance from the sun, and that's all true. But there are so many other things that have to be exactly right, or you do not get life. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that tonight as well. So Steve covered a lot of the first one up there, the start of the universe. I'm just going to add a couple of things to that. That's called the cosmological argument. If you ever heard that fancy terminology, that's called the cosmological argument. The second one has an even weirder name. It's called the teleological argument. It just means design. So people are just trying to be fancy. But Steve talked a lot about the design on the large scale. I'm going to just touch on that and spend more time talking about the small scale of design. Some really cool things. I got a video that I hope works because it's really a neat video. And the existence of moral absolutes, we're not going to get to this tonight, but that's what Steve and I are going to be doing for the next part of our classes, because you can make a moral argument for the existence of God as well. Bob?
Einstein went to Palomar back in the late 50s or maybe early, I don't know. Anyway, when he left, he came out, he said, there's a God.
I'm glad you mentioned Einstein, because I've got something that's going to tie into Einstein here in just a second, so we'll get to that. So tonight, just some of the things that Steve talked about, and then I'd like to spend a few minutes talk about the beginning of life, because that is a tremendous argument you can use these days. Where did life come from? How did life get started? That's gotten to be a lot more complicated than people thought at one time. All right, so here, and then I forgot, third thing, design. Okay, we'll talk about that on the small scale. So Steve talked about this last week, and he blew up the balloon. And so if you wonder what was going on with these people that started realizing that we are in an expanding universe, if you can imagine, this is supposed to be the universe expanding. So if you're on, let's say, a galaxy here, and you look out, you see all the other galaxies appearing to move away from you, right? Just like if you put dots on a balloon, blew it up, the dots are going apart. So you would think, hey, we're in the middle of the entire universe. No, you're not. Every other dot is looking out, seeing all the other dots moving away as well. So this is what's called space-time. It's not, don't think of it as a bubble and wonder what's inside. I mean, everything about the universe is on this outer shell in a sense. So, and then it's gotten bigger and bigger, of course. What I think is fascinating, I want to spend just a couple minutes on this, It's how scientists, when they started coming up with the idea, this is Hubble, Edwin Hubble, the guy they named the telescope after in the 1920s. He was using the big telescope, not Palomar, that wasn't up yet, but up at Mount Wilson in Pasadena and all. So he's looking out, and he's the first one to kind of see these galaxies flying apart, because that was a brand new big telescope for the time. That was 100-inch. So, if you can imagine a mirror that big. Palomar's is over 200, double that. But anyway, so when it first came out, this idea that we're in a universe that's expanding, what I think is fascinating is to see what was going on behind these people that wear their white lab coats and have 55 degrees after their names. You know what you discover? They all have biases. So just because somebody's got a huge degree and fancy this and fancy that and works at a prestigious university, think about what is his or her background as far as their attitude. So many scientists rejected it. They didn't like. In fact, Big Bang was supposed to be a joke name. That wasn't what the people first called it. They said, Big Bang. So that was their attitude. There's a guy named Eddington. He was a very famous British physicist, and he'd done all sorts of work on the cosmos. And he said, the idea of a beginning is repugnant. And I want you to think about that for a second. You know what he's really saying there? Ew, I don't like that. What scientist is supposed to do that? They're not supposed to. They're either supposed to accept something or they're supposed to reject it. They're either supposed to say, that's a great idea, that makes sense of all the data, or they're supposed to say, no, I see some problems with it. But he didn't do that. He said, I don't like it. I don't like it. And then Bob mentioned Einstein. Einstein fudged some mathematics. He fudged the math. He didn't want there to be an expanding universe. So he put in what he called a cosmological constant. He fudged a piece of an equation and said, look, this shows that the universe does not expand. It's steady state. It's not getting any bigger. And everybody went, well, if Einstein says it's true. But more and more evidence came in that there really was a start to the universe and an expansion of the universe. He later on said that was the biggest mistake he ever made. But you see, again, it was a bias going on there. So my question to you, why do you suppose there's this tremendous reluctance? Steve's touched on it a lot last week, but why would there be this pushback?
I don't want to believe in God.
Yeah, because if something starts, now you got to explain how'd that get going. How did that start? And they didn't like that, because if you got steady state, you've got forever to make things happen, right? So life could start accidentally if you had forever, I guess.
Well, it tells them that they're wrong, and no one likes to be told they're
Yeah,
wrong.
that's true too. Yeah, your money dries up. So now it's a really settled theory, and there we go. We just heard tonight from the Webb telescope people. And here's the deal. I know you're thinking Big Bang, kind of like a grenade going off, everything going everywhere. It's not. It's not that kind of an explosion. It's a careful expansion. In fact, if it was any slower, the galaxies and all could not form. It'd just be one big gob of gas, right? If it expanded too slowly, because gravity would keep all that stuff together. If it expanded too fast, you couldn't get stars to join, you couldn't get galaxies to form or anything like that. So in either case, we wouldn't be here to talk about it. So the expansion is exactly right for us to be here tonight. By the way, it echoes the Bible. Everybody says, well, yeah, in Genesis, sure, because it says God created everything. But there are several verses. I just put 2 of them up here. I think there are 3 or 4. I'm just going to take the one in Isaiah. Look what it says. He, talking about God, stretches out the heavens like a canopy and spreads them out like a tent. Doesn't that sound like modern cosmology? The heavens are being spread right now. That's what's happening. Everything is spreading out, and it's in the Old Testament. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So it's not a threat to Christianity. I don't want anybody to think of it as a threat. It is not a threat. The only thing that might be a threat to some people is once they start attaching ages to when all these things happen. And then you get some people who are called young earthers. I think we talked about it just briefly last week. So you get some people that say, no, it can't be that old. Okay, so we don't want to get into that. That's not the point tonight. The point is, meet those people on their terms. In other words, if you're dealing with an atheist or a skeptic of some kind, they buy into all of this. And so obviously a good question to be asked is, how did this thing all get started? It calls out, for, as Steve said last week, it calls out for a big banger. You got to get somebody to start this thing. Somebody's got to strike the match to get all matter, space, time, and energy get going. It's got to be something outside of the universe. Guess what they call that? Supernatural. Right? Natural is what we see all around us, but whatever started it has to be outside of nature. That's called supernatural. So you're looking at, I think the best explanation is God.
It's out of the box.
What's that?
It's out of the box.
It's out of the box, that's right. But now things have changed because it's becoming so widespread, the belief in the Big Bang. It's just interesting to see now what are some scientists saying. So Discover Magazine, not exactly a Christian magazine. I always like to use, if I can, sources that don't agree with us theologically, but if they say things that we can buy into scientifically, bingo. So Discover Magazine said the universe is unlikely, very unlikely, and then they had it actually in italics like this, deeply, shockingly unlikely. In other words, how did it come about? It shouldn't have come about. How odd is that? Scratch your head. Hard to believe. Well, it's not hard to believe from a Christian perspective. 3 Stanford physicists, they did an interview in a very well-known, again, not a Christian magazine called Nature. Arranging the universe as we think it's arranged would have required a miracle. An unknown agent, wait a minute, we've got a pretty good idea. All right, anyway. An unknown agent beyond space and time intervened in the evolution of the universe for reasons of its own. Isn't that interesting? And here's what I think is fascinating. You know what the title of this article was? Disturbing Implications. We're back to Eddington again. He thought it was a repugnant idea. These guys are not real fond of the idea. That's disturbing. Well, it's not disturbing. I think it's wonderful, but disturbing for some people. Okay, so anybody have a question or comment or thought about the beginning of the universe, getting things started? So that's the first point. Okay, so we're all right. So let's tackle something else here. We're going to build this tonight. No, we're not. I just want to see what you'd say. So, anybody know what this is? If you've read any books way back when you're in school maybe, and they talked about life getting started?
Trying to make aminos?
Yeah, this was called the Miller-Urey experiment. This is back in the 50s. So they said, if you want to have life, you got to have amino acids. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. You got to have amino acids. They're like the building blocks to get yourself proteins. And proteins are what's right now keeping you all alive, me too. They're working like crazy on your insides. So you got to get amino acids. So how do you get amino acids? Well, if there's no God, then something's got to have happened way back when, at the beginning of Earth, you know, the Earth being here. So what they did, it's actually a pretty simple idea. They took water, heated it up, it comes up here and it comes over here, and now you've got, they've inserted into this big tube not only that condensed water, but some gases, methane and ammonia and water vapor and hydrogen. Why those things? Because they thought that was what was on the initial Earth, you know, way back when. So they're trying to recreate the atmosphere that they thought was the early Earth's atmosphere. So they put all that stuff in there, and then they have like almost like a spark plug. And why are they doing that? Because they said, look, millions of years ago, or whenever they're saying life started, you got this stuff floating around in the air, all these different gases, and a lightning storm comes. And once that lightning comes, man, it jolts those bits of pieces of inorganic stuff, right? It's not alive, it's just the gases and stuff, but it jolts it enough, and you have a condenser down here that cools all this off, and down here in this trap, guess what they found? Amino acids. And they said, hey, we don't need God, we've got it. Just a little lightning, life is good, right? We got it started. You know, it bothers me a lot. It's still in some textbooks these days, although for the last 20, 30 years, it's absolutely been trashed. Even the people that did it, Miller and Urey, say, nah, that isn't what the early Earth's atmosphere was like. So all of this was useless. Plus, the amino acids they got down here were pointless. They didn't lead to anything. You couldn't do anything with them to turn them into proteins. They were absolutely useless. So, but it was you can understand why they were kind of excited. Hey, you know, this is the first step. We just zap the atmosphere and here we are. Well, that's gone now. So if you ever see this Miller-Urey drawing, you can say, nope, After all, if you're one of these early scientists looking to figure out how life got started, here they are. They're looking at cells, and the cells look pretty simple, right? Just a gob of protoplasm with some kind of dark gunk in the middle, and called it a nucleus, and there you are, and it splits apart. Isn't that nice? But it looked pretty simple. And they thought, well, if it's that simple, it could happen by chance. You know, roll the dice enough, you get that atmosphere going, you get a discharge of lightning, should be good. However, so they've worked like crazy over the last 20, 30 years. Every few years they have, what's it called? It's like a start of life group of scientists that get together in different cities to share their ideas of how life got started.
Symposium.
Yeah, I can't remember the Origin of Life conference or something like that. And they always end up very disappointed. They go away muttering because they try one thing, they try another thing, and it keeps getting shot down. Francis Crick, co-discoverer of the structure of DNA. Every time I write a paper on the origins of life, I swear I'll never write another one because there's too much speculation running after too few facts. So he hasn't been happy with what's happened. Michael Denton, I don't think he's a Christian. The complexity of the simplest known type of cell is so great it's impossible to accept that such an object could have been thrown together suddenly by some kind of freakish, vastly improbable event. Such an occurrence would be indistinguishable from what? A miracle. You hear that again? That's twice tonight. Non-Christians using the term miracle. They're absolutely stumped on how you get life from non-life. Somebody made this comparison. I love this. The probability of life originating from accidents comparable to the probability of an unabridged dictionary resulting from an explosion in a printing shop. As you got all these letters sitting around, and all of a sudden you got A through Z, right? Aardvark to zebras. And so pretty bad odds, I would say. So again, give me a second here. I want to do a little biology with you. So you got amino acids. I mentioned that. Amino acids form themselves, and this is the hard part. You got to form them into chains, and those are called peptides. And those peptides fold, and they have to fold in a precise way, and that forms proteins. And I already mentioned proteins are what you have to have life. So there's the sequence, right? You start with amino acids. So I got to demonstrate something for you. Okay, so if you can imagine, you ever see these things?
He's got one.
Yeah. Well, I wanted the large size so everybody could see what I was talking about. But if you're going to, imagine that these are amino acids, you can't put them together this way, right? So you got a 50% chance if they just bump into each other, they're not going to go this way, they're not going to hook this way. But there are certain ways, if you do it right, you can hook them together, and you hook them together. And if you do it right, you end up with a peptide, and I'm not going to try, I got more of them, I'm not going to take the time. But you could, wrap them around in some way that they will perform this function of being a protein.
When was this discovered?
But that stuff? Oh, that's been around a long, long time. Yeah, I don't know who did it or what. I'm going to talk about DNA in a few minutes. That I know more about. Do you see a lot of zeros up there? Now, these are just estimates. I mean, don't sit there and copy it. Well, you wouldn't copy it down anyway. But somebody one time sat down and figured out how do you make one protein? Because you got to have at least, can you see up here? You have to have at least 100 of those amino acids, those little pop beads. You have to have 100 of them forming just right to create that, amino acid going to a protein, creating itself into a protein. And somebody estimated the chances 1 in all of these, and it says that number is more than all of the atoms that are in the entire universe. So if you can imagine painting one atom in the universe and just throwing it out there somewhere and say, pick it, see if you can find it. Bad odds there. Here's some more discoveries they've come up with as far as the origin of life. Now they're saying that, a lot of people think life is just potluck, it just happened on Earth, that you had billions of years, according to their time scale. Well, we got that much time. But you know what they're finding now? That life actually appeared the second Earth was ready for life, it shows up. Well, that doesn't work if you believe in the view of, gradual stuff kind of happening and bumping into each other and lightning striking gases in the air, that isn't going to happen. A UCLA geochemist organization found evidence life may have begun shortly after the planet formed. So there are not billions of years to deal with at all. It's just a tiny time segment, and all of a sudden life is here. One said life on Earth may have started almost instantaneously. How did that happen? Have you heard about the Cambrian explosion? Yeah, some of you have. It made Time magazine. So what they've discovered, there's this, how they have all these different strata of rocks and all. So in this one strata in the Cambrian time period, which again, I don't want to get into a debate about the time frames that they're using. They're talking maybe 500 million years ago. Okay, so if you don't buy into that, it's okay. That's what they're saying, so you can just go with what they're saying. So they said something like 500 million years ago, all of a sudden, out of nothing, appears all of the modern animal phyla, all of the modern forms of animals. There was nothing, they can't find any previous ones that kind of led to this. It's an explosion. It's all of a sudden there, and it's not just in one spot. It's in Canada, it's in China, it's other places. Here's a person who's got a PhD in zoology. He wrote a book. He said the Cambrian explosion, not just a case of all the major animal phyla appearing about the same place in the geologic column. It's a situation of no ancestors. So how do you get something from nothing? That's like the universe, something from nothing. We got something from nothing going on here. So where are these intermediates that should be there leading up to these animal structures? They're not there. These are quotes from other scientists who are talking about this Cambrian explosion. So I didn't put their names because it's not important, but just so you know what people are saying out there. And no other time has there been such a profusion, such an overwhelming diversity in so short a time. Mm-hmm. Somebody else said it's as though they, talking about fossils, were just planted there without any evolutionary history. It's like somebody just dumped them. Here, have fun. Somebody else said, no single explanation explains the apparent sudden appearance. Well, we have an explanation. Somebody else says this poses an outstanding problem for macroevolution. Macro is the big evolution, from molecules to us, from microbes to us. Here's something else. Yeah, go ahead, Bridget.
When you read the Bible and it talks about how God made the plants according to their own kind. He made the birds according to their own kind. Every single thing he made according to its own kind. Mm-hmm. And there's never been any evolutionary forms, transitional forms found of the plants transitioning, the animals transitioning. Yeah. So I don't know how all of a sudden we can get humans evolved, but there's no transitional forms that show that at all.
They used to talk about the tree of life. Mm-hmm. You remember seeing any of that in your biology books and all that? It would have, a trunk out here, and plankton would be over here, and pretty soon you're up to whales, and then you got people up here. And that, yeah. You know what? They've given up on that, and they're saying it's more like grass. It's like everything is coming, and nothing is coming out of anything else. It's like individual sprouts of grass, which sounds like creation rather than happenstance. Here are a couple more statements I thought were interesting. I'm sorry, it's a long quote, but it's the New York Times, so hey, not a Christian organization. The chemistry of the first life is a nightmare to explain. No one has yet developed a plausible explanation to show how the earliest chemicals of life might have constructed themselves, right? They have to construct themselves if there's no God. From the inorganic chemicals likely to have been around in early Earth. The spontaneous, right? It has to happen spontaneously. It can't have an intervention by somebody. The spontaneous assembly of the RNA molecule on the primitive Earth would have been a near miracle, third time. 2 experts on the subject helpfully declared last year. Well, I think that's kind of tongue-in-cheek, helpfully, not so helpfully for the people that don't want to buy into the idea of God. Here's a Harvard chemist. He's honest, at least he's honest. The origin of life. This problem is one of the big ones in science. Most chemists believe, as do I, that life emerged spontaneously from mixtures of molecules in the prebiotic Earth. How? I have no idea. So it's just a statement of faith. Can you see that? It's just a statement of faith. We're just going to believe it. We don't have any proof. We can't find any proof. We all disagree with each other, but we just know it had to be that way because we're back to the idea of the box. Everything is inside the box. There's no outside of the box. There's no supernatural for these people, so therefore they're scrounging around what's in the box. And they're finding nothing in the box. How about SETI? I love astronomy. I'm a huge fan of astronomy. Anybody know what SETI is?
Search for extraterrestrial intelligence.
Yeah. Remember Carl Sagan? Billions and billions, right? So Carl Sagan and some other people back in the 60s sat down and kind of did their math and figured it out, and they said, hundreds of billions of stars in a galaxy, billions of galaxies. Therefore, there's got to be a zillion places that life could get started because they believe it's easy to get life started. We're back to that again. All you have to do is a little chemistry and zap your environment, your atmosphere, and you got life. Not so much anymore. But so anyways, they thought, well, look, why don't we listen in and see if there's some people or whatever they are, beings out there somewhere that are broadcasting. We didn't do it intentionally, but all of our radio and TV signals are going out into space. Did you see the movie Contact? Or read the book? They get this message from Vega. And anyway, I don't want to spoil it. It's a pretty interesting movie. That was Carl Sagan. He wrote the book called Contact. By the way, you know what's odd to me about Carl Sagan? They get this message from outer space that is the prime numbers. You know, 1, 3, 5, and so on. And they go, hey, that's an intelligent statement that we're getting from the stars. That means there's life out there. But Sagan doesn't count DNA that's inside all of us. What is that? That's information. But he discounts that. Oh no, that doesn't mean anything. But he gets a signal from another star and he's okay with that? I don't get that. Anyway, so SETI has been around now for about 50, 60 years. These are not optical telescopes, these are radio telescopes, really fine-tuned, where they can listen for any kind of signal coming in from outer space. Well, Penn State recently had some scientists searching not 100,000 stars, 100,000 galaxies made up of billions of stars. Zip, nada, zilch, nothing. They haven't heard a thing. Now, I don't think it hurt anybody's view of Christianity if they ever find something out there, but I'm just saying at this point, apparently life is not just teeming out there in the universe. There's a book called Rare Earth. Steve, did you mention that last week?
I mentioned it, but I don't have it, or I haven't read it.
Yeah, I mean, here, again, these are two people, two astronomers. One is Brownling, I can't remember the other guy's name. And look at the title. It's rare. The Earth has all these things going that other places throughout the universe don't seem to have. And then my favorite one, I'm reading a book review. I didn't read the book. I'm reading a book review by a guy, again, he's not a Christian. He wrote a book called The Eerie Silence, which I think says it all. And in that book, he's saying, where are they? We've been doing this for 50 years. Why are we not hearing anything? And he ends up saying this, we're probably the only intelligent beings, not in the solar system or the Milky Way galaxy, he says, in the universe. So you talk about, that's pretty special. 50 years ago, we're living at a great time to be Christians, by the way. If we were meeting here 50 years ago, people thought, oh, life happens everywhere, and it's so easy, and now they're going, no. And they used to say the Earth was really a piddly little planet circling a mediocre star in a corner of the Milky Way, ho-hum, right? But they're saying, no, everything's really special about us and where we are. Yeah.
Gary, are you familiar with, I think it was 1977, they actually heard something on one of these telescopes, and I don't have the particulars of it, but it has, Elvis Presley was involved in it somehow. I wish I could connect that all together, but have you heard about that?
And the Russians. Right.
Are you playing me?
No.
No, I haven't heard that.
And I've seen a graph of the needle when it jumped.
Yeah,
But
but
what it means, I don't know.
yeah, no, they've never found anything. They would have made a huge deal if they had.
Yeah.
Scientific American, not a Christian organization. Exoplanets, that means you're aware that they're beginning to find planets out there in different solar systems, not ours, but out there in the stars. So they've got such great instruments now, they can not only find the stars, they can tell that there are planets going around these stars. So they thought, oh good, we'll start finding all sorts of wonderful things that are like Earth. Oh no, suggests Earth is special after all. Huh. Some of these people have gotten so desperate to figure out how life got started. Have you heard this term, panspermia? Mm-hmm. Yeah? So they have two alternate theories. Some people who are a little less out there, they will go for this theory, that maybe there was a huge meteor that came in and hit the Earth, and it had all sorts of chemicals for life inside of it, and it actually brought life, and that's how we got life here. Others who are a little more out there say maybe it was a spaceship that came by and dumped its holding tanks, you know, kind of like an RV, and then left the debris for us, and there's life. I mean, do you see how desperate this is? By the way, this doesn't explain where life came from, because then you got to figure out what? Where'd that come from? You just pushed it off one step, like hoping people will not pay attention to you, but it's like, come on, that didn't solve the problem. So look for that one. Some people, Francis Crick got behind one of these. I can't remember which one. I don't know if he was kidding, but some people are really buying into this. If we can't get life to happen here, maybe it came from somewhere else. All right, so let's talk about the design argument. That'll be our third point for the night. Steve covered this really well last week, but all of the ways that we're exactly where we should be to have life, everything about us is just exactly perfect. Where we are in the solar system, we have a big brother, Jupiter, out there that protects us from comets. About 15 years ago, I don't know if you saw, but a comet smacked into Jupiter. You ever see that? It actually tore holes in the atmosphere. You could see big chunks of the atmosphere missing from this thing plowing into it. Anyway, so we're in the exact right spot, all the way down. Right spot in the Milky Way galaxy. You don't want to be near the center. You just get fried with all the radiation. You don't want to be on the edge because you get disturbances from other stars. We're in the perfect spot. Let me tell you a story. It's a fictional story, but it's a good story, since I told you I'm using the God Conversation book for a lot of this. And if you want to get somebody to picture what we're talking about here, about how perfect things are set up for us. So imagine that my wife and I want to go do a vacation, and so we just pick someplace at random, right? So I rent a cabin. And I've never been there, okay, so it's not a return visit. I've never been there. I don't know the people that own it. They're just willing to rent it to me. Okay, just talk to them over the phone. There's the money. We're ready to go. But when I show up, on the shelf, they got cornflakes. I love cornflakes. They've got not any brand of lemonade, Simply. I get that at Vaughn's. So I love lemonade. Anything lemon is fine. They got, sitting in the medicine cabinet, they got Crest cavity protection toothpaste. I've tried others. And so this is my toothpaste. I'm going, okay. They've got music for me to listen to. Okay, I know this dates me, but Turn, Turn, Turn. Anybody recognize? Okay, Tambourine Man. All right. Anyway, I got to see him live one time. That was a lot of fun. So they've got their album sitting there, a CD. I go, oh, this is nice. Salted peanuts. Anything better than salted peanuts? This is my guy, Willie Mays. And they've got the biography of Mays sitting on the bookshelf. So here's my question. What's my conclusion? Somebody knew I was coming, because it's all prepared specifically for me. All the things that will make my life comfortable and make me happy. It's the same for the universe. Everything out there seems to be perfectly prepared for life here, this kind of life that we're used to. I'll just give you a couple of ideas. It's not just my idea, by the way. Stephen Weinberg, he is an out-and-out, blatant, hardcore, mean-spirited atheist. But here's what he said. He says, just one of all of those constants that have to be exactly right. This is called the cosmological constant, so don't worry about it. But he says it's remarkably well adjusted in our favor. Remarkably. I like that word. Here's somebody else, Paul Davies again. He's the one that talked about the eerie silence, wondering where everybody is. There's powerful evidence there's something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. The impression of design is overwhelming. And this is a guy that's been dragged kicking and screaming to that conclusion. He doesn't really want that conclusion. Here's Chuck Klosterman, New York Times author, said this, 20 numbers that he referenced, there's way more than that, but he just picked out 20 that make the universe possible. He says, appear inconceivably fine-tuned. They're so perfect, it almost appears as if someone set these numbers. But who could have done that?
No.
Hey Chuck, we got an idea. So key question, how do we recognize design? We've been talking about design here. Well, let's again think about an illustration, Mount Rushmore. Anybody had a chance to go there? Oh, wow. Yeah. I haven't been there. It must be really amazing. Pretty good? Yeah. I thought this was interesting. Each head is 60 feet. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm about 6 feet, so 10 of me just to do that head. I don't like heights anyway. I can't imagine working there, chiseling as you're looking down 1,000 feet or something. Each nose is 20 feet long. You think you got a problem with your nose, right? A 20-foot nose. Each eye is 11 feet across. And if they stood up, they'd be 465 feet tall. That'd be a good-sized person. So why do we think, and I'd like to ask you, why do we think Rushmore was designed? Why don't we think that lightning and erosion and rain and varmints of one kind or another created that?
It's too random, too precise.
It's too precise, isn't it? There's information and complexity there, especially complexity. And it's not going to happen unless somebody designs it. I mean, they had to have forethought. They had to think about, what do I want to accomplish here? So it's complex. There's specified information in it. It looks like actual presidents that we've had in our country. Mm-hmm. It shows a lot of intention and planning. I mean, you have to figure out where you want to put it on that rock. It kind of looks to me like they sort of ran out of the Teddy Roosevelt idea. You know, because you got the three big guys that are in there, Washington and Jefferson and Lincoln, then they still had some room. It's like, okay, we got to get Teddy in there, so they work him in there. But it shows a lot of planning to pull that thing off. I mean, I can't even imagine how you do that, you know?
How many years did it take?
I don't know.
Mark, I'm in a classroom.
Now, knock it off, Mark. So let's move along to where we can see a lot of complexity as well. All of us tonight, right here, our bodies. I mean, think about how complex the ear is. That's incredibly complex. I'm not going to talk about any of this. I just want us to think about that. The heart. I mean, how many hundreds of thousands of gallons does a heart pump in a lifetime? It's amazing what it can do. The eye. The eye especially, that bothered Darwin a lot because it looks really complicated and it looks designed, and he didn't like that. So William Paley in the early 1800s was a Christian churchman, and he said, you know, the eye looks a whole lot like a telescope. It works like a telescope. You get the light coming in, you get the focus, and then you get somebody staring at it right there. So you get the same thing with the eye. And he says, if you get a telescope because of intelligent design, intelligent thought, and a procedure that somebody has created, then why not the eye? I mean, they're similar as far as the way they function. Let's move down even smaller, though, the cell. Remember how I was saying at one time they thought the cell was really pretty easy to duplicate, and now, I mean, this is just a cross-section of the stuff that's going on inside the cell. So here's the deal. I'm hoping I can pull this off tonight. It's just a 3-minute video, and what they're going to do, there's not going to be any talking in it. It's just an illustration with some background music, and it was put out by Harvard, not a Christian organization, and it's called The Inner Life of the Cell. And you can look it up. It's just on YouTube. But I wanted you to see, and again, you're going to see all sorts of stuff happening. You're going to go, what's happening? I don't get it. That's not the point. I mean, we're not going to turn this into a biology class, but I just wanted you to see, once you're inside the cell, the kinds of things that go on. So let's see if we can pull this off. if I cut some lights? Okay, this is my favorite part coming up. That's a protein that's taking stuff that they need in the cell someplace. It's transporting it. Yeah, and like I said, it's, let's see if I get this thing to, okay, there we go. So you can look it up if you want online. There are places where you go to YouTube and, hang on, you can go to YouTube and it'll give you the information of what you're seeing, at the minute and a half mark, this is what's happening and all sorts of stuff. But the point is, 50 years ago, when they didn't have those kinds of good microscopes and all, they didn't know any of this stuff. And none of that you saw is just randomness happening. I mean, each thing is a process that's going on inside you for a particular purpose. The one thing that I thought was fun, did you see those tubules forming and pulling apart? Those are transportation corridors, so it'd be like taking the 78 or something and pulling it apart every day and putting it back together. I mean, your cell can do it. It wants something to go over to there, so these microtubules form up as a net or a way for the traffic to go there. And then you get this thing, it's called kinesin. That's that little walker. Is that a cool or what? I mean, that thing, it walks along and it's carrying this monstrous chunk of whatever it needed. And you've got some of these, it's different proteins. Some of them carry stuff into the cell and some of them carry stuff out of the cell. The cell's a city. I mean, it's just like a city, except it duplicates itself, which is really...
Was that like one cell, or was that pictures inside a variety of cells that we're looking at?
No, yeah, it's one cell.
So that whole
Everything's
is
going
one
on.
cell.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Oh yeah, it's way
Flat
beyond.
out.
Yeah.
That's one white cell inside the bloodstream.
Oh my goodness.
Vinny?
Yeah, but they've captured that view. I've seen video of the real thing. And that's how a cell, like a nerve cell, which is very long, is able to form new mitochondria cells. And then they have to transport it to where it's needed. And that little device hooks on that guide wire, sort of. The bridge gets constructed, and then that little walker pulls the mitochondria cell through the length like a long nerve cell
Hmm.
and gets it to where it needs to go.
Yeah,
It's
just,
Star Wars weird to watch it.
oh yeah, isn't that amazing? I love that. But you can find it, it's called the inner life of the cell. And there are other things like that, but that really knocked me out. Then you got something called the bacterial flagellum. You know, there's some bacteria that have like a little whip, and it's like a propeller, and it sends them right through the, whatever their medium is, water or something. And people look at that, and now they've got microscopes that can pull that up and let you see what it is. So imagine this is kind of the edge of the cell. This is what's going on inside that bacteria, and out here is that propeller part. So does that look like something done by General Motors, right? I mean, it's got all these pieces. It's just unbelievable. And it comes down to something called irreducible complexity. So just give me a couple of minutes for that. A man named Michael Behe wrote a book, and he talked about irreducible complexity. He said, we've got so many systems inside of us that are made up of different pieces, and every piece has to be together to make whatever it is work. And if God doesn't put it together, if it just kind of randomly happens, they're not going to all come together, you know, like I showed you in that diagram. They're not all going to come along at the same time, thanks to evolution. One or two of those things might evolve. So here's my illustration of that. So you've got a mousetrap, right? And it works because you got all these pieces. But if you take off any of these pieces, it's not going to work very well. So, you know, how many mice are you going to catch with this? I guess you hit them over the head, I suppose, but that doesn't work very well. So you go, wait a minute, maybe we'll get this hammer piece to evolve at the same time, but that's not going to work. There's no connection for it. There's no spring to pull it back. You don't have the little trap piece for the mouse to step on. I mean, you got to have all of these pieces together, or you don't get yourself a functioning mousetrap. And he's saying we've got all of that stuff going on inside us that has to evolve. If that's the word, they'd all have to evolve at the same time. In his book, he gives the example of blood clotting. There's something like 15 or 18 proteins that have to turn on and turn off for you to clot your blood okay. I mean, think about it. If you cut yourself, you want it to bleed a little bit to get rid of the imperfections, but you also want it to stop, otherwise you're hemophiliac. But you don't want it to stop and start clotting you all over. It should only clot on your finger or whatever it is. So there's a whole sequence of these things that have to happen, or you don't get blood clotting. And they all have to happen at the same, they would all have to evolve at the same time. That isn't the way evolution works. Evolution is random by definition. It's happenstance. So you don't get these kinds of formations. By the way, that I just looked it up today because I was curious, that little motor inside the bacteria, it goes 10,000 RPM. You can't do that with your car, right? At 60, you're doing maybe what, 2,000 RPM, 2,500? I mean, you can really wind it out to maybe 6,000 or 8,000. But here's what I thought was great. It goes 10,000 RPM, and within a half a turn, it can stop and go backwards, 10,000 RPM. So it'd be like take your Toyota out on the freeway and do 70 and then shove it in reverse and watch what happens. Bad idea.
You have a big bang.
Yeah, you got a big bang. Good one. But this is what's happening inside of us. Bridget?
My dad was a research scientist at UCSD. He was the head of the Department of Genetics, and he said, why do you believe in evolution? And he said, if I did not believe and support evolution, I would be the laughing stock of the science world, and I would lose my job.
Yeah.
So he had to support it in order to maintain his,
Yeah.
his research and his life.
Yeah, they circle the wagons pretty well.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting though, in public they will say one thing, but talking to each other, they've said a lot of very different things. They admit that they're really stuck on evolution, which is a different topic. How about DNA? I already mentioned this, so I'm not going to take much time on that, but DNA, so imagine here's your chromosome, and if you pull it apart, you got this little string, and then that comes apart further, and you can see it's like a ladder, and you got these chemicals that meet in the middle here, and you pull the ladder apart, and then you get a reader that comes up, and it reads these C, T, G, A, those are 4 different kinds of chemicals, and that's the blueprint to make you. That's how it made you.
They're all different.
So it's kind of like computer code, except it's way more complicated. You got just binary computer code. You got your zeros and ones. What have you got down here to make us? You got a 4-bit code. It's way more complicated. Bill Gates said it's the most complicated computer code ever. Does Gates know computer code? Yeah, I think so. So just for fun, if DNA in one of your cells was stretched out, it'd be 6 feet. Talk about compact and working in one cell. You got 6 feet of DNA. That's like an encyclopedia, right, to reproduce you. If your whole body's DNA was stretched out, it'd go across the whole solar system. Isn't that wild? Based on these things I've been telling you in the last few minutes here, there's a very famous atheist. His name is Antony Flew, since passed away, but he wrote a book. He was really a well-known atheist. Every atheist that wanted to, look like they knew what they were talking about, they would quote Antony Flew. So he's come out with a book before he passed away. There is, scratch, a God. He changed his mind. Here's what he said. I now believe there is a God. I now think the evidence points, he says, to a creative intelligence almost entirely because of DNA. What I think the DNA material has done is that it's shown by the most unbelievable complexity of the arrangements, which, oh, I got which on there twice, sorry, which are needed to produce life, that intelligence must have been involved in getting these extraordinarily diverse elements to work together. It had to be intelligence, he says, to get all that to happen. So I don't think he went all the way to Christianity, but he really changed big time to say, there's something out there. There's got to be because of DNA. How do you get DNA? You get DNA the same way you get software. There's a mind behind software. There's a mind behind DNA. It's information. How do you get information? From a mind, not accidents. But of course, we talked about this briefly last week, and I won't spend much time on it, but what about the multiverse? Well, there's no evidence. How could there be evidence? Eric, I think you pointed out, if we can only see what's in this universe, how would you know there's another universe out there? Makes no sense at all. And they all need a beginning. And it only came along. They only started this argument about multiverse when intelligent design started looking really powerful in the last few years. So they're looking for a fallback position. Well, okay, so we got a lot of information that seems to say we're really tightly organized here for life. We need another fallback position. So the multiverse came along. I mean, imagine a bread machine. Yeah, if you put in enough ingredients, you'll get different kinds of bread, right? But you put the ingredients in. Somebody's got to, who's creating this machine that's cranking out these different universes and cranking them out so that each one is slightly different than the other? How does that happen? Now, there's no answer to any of that. I'm going to end with a surprised person, Voltaire, who's actually an atheist. But he said, if a watch proves the existence of a watchmaker, but the universe does not prove the existence of a great architect, then I consent to be called a fool. Isn't that interesting? So even though, basically the guy was an atheist, he's saying, hey, watches, they're made, the universe looks pretty darn complicated and all, and so there must be some kind of architect out there. Okay, well that's a whirlwind tour. We have a couple of minutes if you have a quick question, and next week Steve's going to be taking on that third argument, the moral argument. Anybody have a thought or a question? Or? Yeah.
When you were talking earlier about the different scientists were saying a miracle, I remember a Gary Larson cartoon years ago, that guy with 2 chalkboards using a white lab coat. He's got all these equations here, and then down it says, then a miracle occurs, and goes to the top, and he starts it again.
Yeah, a miracle occurs here. Yeah, I got to find, that's a good one. Yeah, it's a Gary Larson cartoon. Yes, Maria?
So in the Bible, it says that at the end times, the universe is going to roll back like a spool, because right now it's stretching, so it's going to...
Ah, yeah, that's interesting.
Because when you were talking about that, I'm like, yeah, it's just...
Yeah, hard to say whether that's literal or figurative language at that point.
Well, I was reading the commentary from about the 1900 or so, and he said, well, the universe began with an apocalypse, it's going to end with an apocalypse.
Yeah. By the way, the expansion of the universe, some people may say, well, look, if it expands, maybe it'll contract and then expand, then contract. That's been ruled out. You lose energy doing that. You can't keep having it rebound. It's not going to happen. So they're kind of stuck with the actual beginning of the universe. Any other question on it? Yeah, Steve?
Yeah. The Miller-Urey experiment that created the amino acids, the biggest problem was oxygen. When they put the gases together, they thought there wasn't oxygen on the early Earth, and when it came out that there was oxygen, oxygen wipes out any early life. It just destroys it. So they had to get rid of oxygen when they did that, when they made the amino acids. So that's one. And then you mentioned Michael Denton. Michael Denton was a hardcore atheist, wrote a book called Evolution, A Theory in Crisis. It started the intelligent design movement on this book. And I was reading it, and when I finished, I was in tears. Reading it